Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of, well, profound, comforting precision.
Right, exactly. A binary state.
Yeah. Think about how we treat a broken bone. You fall, you hear a snap, you go to the hospital, the doctor puts you in front of an x-ray machine, and a few minutes later, they slap this black and white image up on a light board.
And they can literally just point right to it.
Exactly. They point to a very clear, jagged white line across your radius and say, there it is. That's the problem. Broken or not broken, you can point to the pain.
We really crave that visibility, I think. I mean, human beings are fundamentally pattern-seeking creatures. We build our entire understanding of reality on the premise that things can be, categorized, isolated, and fixed with mechanical certainty.
Yes, the X-ray is like the ultimate symbol of that worldview. If we can see it, we can understand it.
But then you step out of the orthopedic ward and into the world of neurodevelopment.
Oh, entirely. You step into the realm of psychological trauma, of memory, of the human mind itself, and suddenly that metaphorical X-ray machine is just completely useless.
It really is. You're looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky.
Yeah, you have overlapping symptoms, you have highly subjective experiences, you have memories that feel totally real but might be completely fabricated, and hallucinations that feel more visceral than waking life.
It forces a confrontation with the limits of our own perception, really. When you are dealing with the mind, the boundary between an internal symptom and an external truth becomes highly, highly porous.
It does. How do you definitively prove that a patient's vivid, persistent internal reality is merely a misfiring synapse,
Right.
rather than a genuine perception of something our standard biological equipment just isn't tuned to pick up?
Right, and that profound feeling of standing in those murky waters, of not knowing what is a biological glitch and what might actually be a fundamental hidden truth of the universe, that is exactly where we are starting our deep dive today.
I am so excited for this one. We are taking on a massive, wildly ambitious piece of source material for you today. We are unpacking a really dense, genre-bending text known as the Annunaki Bible.
And the author explicitly frames this entire narrative as a story based on real dreams.
Which is such a wild concept.
It is. That framing is critical, though. It immediately subverts the idea that we are reading a standard piece of fiction. It demands that we treat the text not as a manufactured plot, but as a translation of an actual experience.
Oh, and it is a mind-bending labyrinth. I mean, if you are tracking the genres here, we are weaving together ancient Sumerian mythology, hard deep space science fiction, and the kind of intense psychological thriller that makes you question your own reflection in the mirror.
It's a lot to take in.
It really is.
Yeah.
But our mission today is to extract the mechanics behind this lore. We are not here to debate what is literal historical fact and what is a metaphorical dreamscape. We want to rip into the engine of this text.
Right. We are looking for the structural logic of this universe, because the concepts presented here offer a radically different framework for understanding our own existence.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we have to start at the absolute beginning, with the beings at the center of this entire cosmic architecture, the Anunnaki.
Though in this specific text, they refer to themselves as the Jennas.
Right, the Jennas. Now, if you've spent any time on the internet looking at ancient astronaut theories or reading pop translations of Sumerian clay tablets, you definitely have an image in your head. You're picturing giant, muscular, bearded humanoids stepping off a spaceship.
Yeah, the pop culture depiction is entirely anthropocentric. We always imagine gods in our own image.
Always.
But this text strips that away completely. It presents a biological profile that is deeply, uncomfortably alien.
Let's talk about that biology, because the contrast is staggering. Earth life is fundamentally carbon and oxygen-based. We are the product of the great atmospheric expansion.
Relying on a recipe of hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen.
Exactly. But the genus evolved on a completely different branch of the cosmic tree. Their foundation is hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and crucially, silicon.
The introduction of silicon as the primary structural element changes everything about their physiology.
How so? Like biochemically speaking?
Well, from a biochemical standpoint, carbon is incredibly versatile because it can form long, stable chains and rings. That gives us the complex polymers needed for DNA and proteins. Silicon sits right beneath carbon on the periodic table.
Okay, so it's similar.
It is. It also has 4 valence electrons, meaning it can form 4 bonds, but the silicon bonds are weaker, and silicon-oxygen bonds are incredibly strong.
Which is why most silicon on Earth is locked up in rocks, right? In silicates.
Exactly. For silicon-based life to exist, it requires a completely different solvent than water and a fundamentally different cellular architecture.
Which completely explains their physical appearance in the text. I mean, the visual here is so vivid and so far removed from humanity. They don't look like us at all.
Not even a little bit.
The text describes them as having sleek, black, dolphin-like skin. They have massive, dark, seal-like eyes that take up most of their faces. And their central nervous system isn't centralized in a single mammalian brain structure.
No, it's described as being closer to an octopus's brain.
Which is wild to think about.
It implies a distributed intelligence. An octopus has a central brain, but 2/3 of its neurons are distributed throughout its arms. They can process information, react to stimuli, and even think locally in their extremities.
So if the genus operate on a similar decentralized neural network, their perception of self, of pain, and of their environment would be radically different from a human's localized top-down processing.
Absolutely. And the physical differences extend to how they communicate, too. They don't have a human larynx.
Right, they don't have a mouth that functions like ours. The text describes them having vertically aligned, muscle-controlled skin flaps where you'd have an upper lip.
Yeah, they use these flaps to generate sound.
And when they actually open their mouths to consume something, two large, rigid mandibles emerge from their lower jaws.
It is a terrifying image to a human observer. I mean, it's a blend of aquatic mammal and insectoid features.
Stuff of nightmares, honestly.
But from an evolutionary standpoint, it represents a highly specialized adaptation to their native environment. However, that intense specialization becomes their fatal flaw.
The Earth problem. So the genus are cosmic refugees. Their home world, which they just call planet, because early in their development they couldn't conceive of anything beyond their own sphere.
Right.
It suffered a cataclysm. The sky ceiling cracked, the atmosphere failed, and they had to flee. They eventually find our world, which they call Kai, but there is a massive biological roadblock.
Their silicon-based cellular structure is totally incompatible with Earth's atmospheric chemistry.
Because of the water.
Mostly, yes. To a silicon-based organism that likely evolved in a completely different temperature and solvent environment, Earth's water-rich, oxygen-heavy atmosphere might be incredibly corrosive.
Right. If their biochemistry relies on different solvents, encountering liquid water might literally break down their cellular bonds. They would dissolve or calcify.
Exactly. So they can't just land and take over. They have to hide.
The text specifies that they seek refuge in the deep oceans and large freshwater lakes. If you're looking for their ships, they aren't hiding behind the moon. They are hovering in the Marianas Trench.
But a civilization cannot survive indefinitely in a submerged holding pattern. They need to interact with the terrestrial environment. They need resources.
They need an ambassador, so they decide to engineer a bridge. They initiate this massive biological project to create hybrid suns.
And this brings us to one of the most fascinating concepts in the text, the definition of Gaia.
Yes, we usually hear Gaia and think of this warm, maternal earth goddess, a poetic personification of nature. But this source material treats Gaia like a planetary operating system.
It's an ecological immune system. The text defines Gaia as an active, localized energy field, a planetary spirit that synchronizes all indigenous biology.
Like a firewall.
Basically, think of it like the major histocompatibility complex in human cells. Your body uses specific proteins to flag cells as self. If an organ is transplanted into your body and it lacks those self markers, your immune system identifies it as an invader and attacks it.
No matter how much you need that organ to survive, that is a perfect way to look at it. The spirit of the Genesis home planet and the spirit of Earth operate on entirely different, incompatible frequencies.
Right. So Jayska, one of the Jenna generals, attempts to hack this system.
She oversees the creation of hybrids in these massive high-tech nurseries, trying to blend human DNA, Jenna's silicon biology, and the energetic signature of Gaia herself. They engineer these pale, ice-blue-eyed children.
It's a desperate attempt to create a being that possesses the intellectual and telepathic architecture of the Jennas, but the biological and energetic self-markers required to exist on Earth's surface without being rejected.
But the very first attempt is a catastrophic failure, and it's a horrific one. I mean, you would assume that a civilization capable of interstellar travel and advanced genetic engineering would have run the simulations, right?
I think so.
You'd think they'd nail the basic life support parameters. But the first hybrid sun they place on the surface only survives for a few agonizing months.
Because the planetary immune system, Gaia, recognizes the anomaly. The biological hardware was theoretically sound, but the energetic integration failed.
The planet actively went to war with this child. The text says the grass literally cut his feet like razors. The sun scorched his pale skin, causing it to erupt in tumors and boils.
It's just brutal.
The water he drank didn't hydrate him. It systematically shut down his internal organs. It was full biological rejection. And because the Genis operate on that decentralized telepathic network we talked about, the entire Hitter fleet felt his death.
They experienced his physical agony and his terror echoing through their collective consciousness for weeks.
It is a profound demonstration of the limits of purely cerebral intelligence. Here's where it gets really interesting, to me at least. The Genis possessed incredible intellectual and technological prowess, but they entirely lacked the primal, brutal instincts required for raw survival on a hostile world.
They engineered a mind capable of bridging the stars, but they forgot to engineer a body that could fight back against the dirt.
Right. If you're building a hyper-advanced quantum computer, you don't plug it directly into a lightning rod during a thunderstorm. The hardware is going to fry.
That's a great analogy.
And honestly, I have to challenge the supposed wisdom of the Anunnaki here. The text reveres them as these ancient, grand entities. Their evolutionary timeline is double ours. How does a civilization that old completely overlook basic Darwinian principles?
It's a huge oversight.
How do you forget to include aggression, resilience, and a survival drive in your very first planetary ambassador?
It points to an evolutionary blind spot. A species that has relied on technology and collective telepathic harmony for millions of years might simply lose the genetic memory of struggle.
They just forgot what it was like to fight to survive.
Exactly. They viewed Earth as a puzzle to be solved with elegance, rather than a wilderness that required brute force to conquer. But they learned their lesson fast.
Oh, they definitely overcorrected. Because the next generation of hybrids, the beings that become known as the Nephilim and the Titans in human mythology, were heavily overcorrected for survival.
They built them massive, they built them strong, they built them to be incredibly aggressive.
Biological bulldozers, essentially.
Exactly. But in solving the physical problem, they created a deeply psychological and spiritual one. The prime example the text uses to illustrate this failure is Gilgamesh.
Seeing Gilgamesh framed through this sci-fi lens completely changes the epic. In this lore, Gilgamesh is a hybrid, 1 part human, 3 parts god.
Right.
He is the son of Lugalbanda, who is one of the first generation of surviving hybrids. And Gilgamesh is the ultimate physical specimen. He's this powerhouse of muscle and nervous energy, acting as the enforcer.
He gathers supplies for the hidden fleet, he can tap into the Earth spirit, and he communicates with the Genis hovering in the sky. He is the functional bridge they always wanted.
But the environment is degrading. Human populations are beginning to rebel against the Anunnaki's hidden influence. The technology that was gifted to early humans is being weaponized.
And Gilgamesh finds himself acting as the strongman, trying to hold a fracturing world together through sheer force.
The climax of this tension happens at the Sunset Cave. Gilgamesh travels to this incredible ancient stone city built by the first hybrids, the carp-headed Titans.
Right.
He climbs the ziggurat, which is this massive structure carved straight out of the bedrock, featuring a literal fountain of light cascading toward the stars at its peak. And in the Great Hall of Light, he confronts his father, Lugalbanda.
Lugalbanda is uniquely positioned to see the tragedy unfolding in his son. Because Lugalbanda still maintains a strong connection to Gaia, he can sense the internal energetic shift within Gilgamesh.
He can see him slipping away.
Yes. He realizes that every time Gilgamesh exerts physical dominance, every time he uses violence and aggression to solve a problem, his spiritual bandwidth narrows.
It's an inverse relationship. If you're constantly using a jackhammer, you're going to lose the ability to hear a tuning fork.
Exactly.
Lugalbanda tries to intervene. He tells Gilgamesh, this light is not supposed to strengthen you, it's only supposed to bring life. He is begging his son to return to a state of balance.
But Gilgamesh is exhausted and furious. He sees the human world burning, and he feels abandoned by the pure-blood Genis hiding in the oceans.
He tells his father that the gods have lost their strength to shield the people, and that he has to do their dirty work.
The physical survival traits the Genis programmed into him are now overriding his intended purpose as a spiritual bridge.
And erupts into violence against his own creator. Gilgamesh begins to glow. His veins start pulsating with this intense blue light. The text says he literally makes the stone ground shake with his energy, and he physically hurls Lugalbanda against the wall of the ziggurat. He screams at him, "I am doing your job, fool!" No more gods than you.
It is the ultimate rebellion of the machine against its programmer. Gilgamesh chooses the physical world over the spiritual connection. He survives the hostile environment of Earth, but he completely severs the delicate link to Gaia that made him a hybrid in the first place.
He becomes trapped in the physical realm. So the Anunnaki realize they cannot conquer Earth biologically. The delicate spiritual hybrids die, and the strong, aggressive hybrids rebel.
They are forced to accept a compromise they cannot openly rule.
No.
Yeah.
They have to operate entirely in the shadows, existing as a covert, subterranean, and submarine influence. This forces a complete shift in their tactics.
They go from trying to build overt god kings to relying on hidden, parasitic, and symbiotic survival strategies. Which brings us perfectly to the next era of contact.
Fast forward a bit.
Right. We move from the macro-level failures of ancient civilizations to a deeply intimate, micro-level intervention.
The year is 1714. We are on the Mediterranean Sea. Captain Emmanuel J. Cook is leaning over the rail of his ship at night, looking down into the dark water, and he locks eyes with something impossible.
It's a silvery form hovering just beneath the surface.
Yeah, radiating a faint, bioluminescent glow in the moonlight. Cook feels this immediate, intense electric connection. It's almost hypnotic, but his crew doesn't feel the connection at all.
They just see a monster.
Exactly. They panic, they start throwing debris at it, and the creature responds with an inhuman, concussive scream that completely incapacitates the crew. But for some reason, the scream doesn't affect Emmanuel.
He assumes he has encountered a mermaid, a creature of pure myth. But the reality is far more complex and deeply tied to the ancient failures we just discussed.
A year later, Emmanuel discovers exactly what she is. Her name is Reba. She is a 2,000-year-old alien hybrid.
Which is incredible to think about.
It is. She has maroon hair and highly evolved gills on her neck. She reveals that her people are nomads. They don't have grand ziggurats anymore. They live in hidden cave systems stretching from the Sea of Galilee down to the Red Sea.
They survive by being master craftsmen. They are stone shapers, metallurgists, holding onto fragments of Jenna engineering. They are the remnants of the failed experiment, forced into hiding, utilizing a blend of advanced biological legacy and highly practical earthbound physics.
But their interaction with humanity is fraught with danger, and the narrative demonstrates this in a shockingly brutal way. It gets so dark so fast.
It really does.
Emmanuel has a young cabin boy named Jones. Jones and a burly crewmate named Nathan are walking through the ancient port city of Akko. They are suddenly ambushed by locals in an alleyway, and there is no cinematic fight scene for Jones. He is shot directly in the head at point-blank range.
Just horrible.
Nathan manages to fight off the attackers, but the boy is dead on the cobblestones. Suddenly, these hidden nomads, Reba's people, emerge from the shadows. They capture Nathan and Emmanuel, take Jones's body, and drag them all into a glowing ancient cave system beneath the hidden stone city of Petra.
And this is where the text introduces the mechanics of biological resurrection. It presents an architecture of miracles that challenges everything we understand about life and death.
Emmanuel wakes up tied to a stone pillar in this cavern. Reba standing over a stone slab. The dead, naked body of the cabin boy Jones is lying there on a bed of myrrh. Reba is systematically smearing his lifeless body with strange oils.
And Emmanuel's losing his mind, naturally.
He is screaming at her, demanding to know what she is doing defiling a corpse. But Reba simply cuts his bindings and tells him, "Be silent and watch."
She begins to chant. The acoustics of the cave start to hum with this low, resonant frequency.
And then from the high, dark ceiling of the cavern, something begins to lower itself. I want you, the listener, to try and conceptualize this, because it defies all logic.
It's a very bizarre image.
It is a translucent, gelatinous mass. It looks almost like a deep-sea jellyfish, but it has dozens of thin, independently writhing tendrils. It is slowly descending on a thread of its own making.
Reba identifies this entity as a symbiotic angel. The text also refers to it interchangeably as a soul.
The tendrils reach the dead body of the boy. They begin to press against his skin, probing, and then they forcefully burrow directly into his spine.
Which is just a visceral, horrifying thought.
Emmanuel is watching in absolute horror as the boy's skin ripples and bulges unnaturally, while these thick gelatinous tendrils thread themselves through his central nervous system. And then, the mechanical reality of the healing happens. With a sickening wet pop, the lead bullet that was lodged inside Jones's brain is physically pushed out of the entry wound in his skull by the symbiote.
It's incredible.
Blood starts pumping again. The dead boy arches his back off the stone slab, opens his mouth in a silent scream, and his eyes open. He is alive.
If we break down the theoretical biology of what just occurred, it's staggering. The symbiote appears to act as a secondary external nervous system. Upon entering the host's spinal column, it must rapidly map the connectome, the entire network of neural pathways.
Like it's scanning a hard drive.
Exactly. It identifies the structural damage caused by the bullet, isolates the area, and likely triggers a localized flood of rapid mitosis stem cells to instantly rebuild the destroyed brain tissue while physically expanding to expel the foreign object.
It is biological nanotechnology operating at a macroscopic scale. To a human in 1714, it is unequivocally the work of God. But the text brilliantly juxtaposes this cosmic, soul-manipulating technology with incredibly grounded physical engineering.
Right, because right after we see Reba perform a biological resurrection, we see her moving rocks.
The contrast is essential to understanding their existence. They aren't just magical beings, they're surviving engineers. Reba takes a simple goat bladder. She fills it with pulverized feldspar, tiny pieces of copper, vinegar, and salt water.
Very basic materials.
She seals it, dives down to the bottom of the Sea of Galilee, and wedges this bladder underneath an enormous multi-ton basalt stone that they need to move for their underwater architecture.
It's a beautifully simple chemical reaction. The acetic vinegar reacts with the mineral's likely a carbonate impurity in the feldspar, or perhaps acting as an electrolyte with the copper and salt water to create a rapid off-gassing effect.
The reaction generates gas, the bladder expands with incredible hydraulic pressure, and it acts as a lift bag, displacing the water and lifting a stone that 100 men couldn't move.
They possess symbiotes from the stars, and they know how to make a bomb out of a goat's stomach.
It's such a wild spectrum of technology.
But the real philosophical weight of this segment comes when Emmanuel is taken by Reba's brother Farsa deeper into the underground chambers beneath Akko. Farsa shows him a collection of ancient scrolls.
He reveals that these are the remnants of the Annunaki Bible.
And Farsa is very careful to clarify what this text actually is. He warns Emmanuel not to look at it through the lens of human religion. It is not a book of moral commandments. It is a book of universal logic. It is a mathematical and historical record of cause and effect that details the past, the present, and inevitably the future.
Farsa explains how logic predicts the future. He tells Emmanuel, you can build a house, but it will never be finished. He points to the very walls of the city of Akko around them. He shows how the Crusaders built their fortresses directly on top of older Roman and Byzantine structures, which were built on top of ancient Canaanite settlements.
He argues that history is nothing but a continuous echo of the original template.
It's the concept of recursive societal loops. Because the foundational architecture of human civilization was heavily influenced, if not outright designed, by the Anunnaki's early interventions, humanity is incapable of building anything truly new.
We are just repainting the walls of the maze they constructed for us. The layers of the physical city perfectly mirror the layers of alien manipulation.
But let's pause and consider the implications of Reba's miracle with the cabin boy. I mean, if you are Emmanuel, you just watched an alien jellyfish rewire your friend's brain. But we find out very quickly that this intervention comes with a massive, near-fatal biological cost.
The concept of the planetary immune system returns, but this time on a micro level.
Exactly. A few days after the resurrection, Jones collapses. The veins in his neck and arms start turning vivid red and deep blue. He is burning up with a fever. He is dying of severe blood poisoning.
The human body is actively rejecting the alien angel.
His white blood cells are attacking the very symbiote that is keeping his brain functioning.
The biological hardware of a human being is not designed to host a genus symbiote. It causes a catastrophic autoimmune cascade.
So to save him a second time, Reba has to endure agonizing pain to physically extract her own symbiote from her body and swap it with the one inside Jones, hoping her older, more adapted symbiote can stabilize him.
It's a huge risk for her.
And it forces you to ask, are the Anunnaki actually benevolent guardians of humanity? Or are they just recklessly playing God with their pets? They drop these massive biological interventions into human lives without fully understanding or perhaps caring about the physiological consequences.
It highlights a chilling detachment, honestly. They view human biology as a substrate to be manipulated, repaired, or utilized, rather than as sovereign life. And as we trace this timeline forward into the modern era, that detachment evolves from clumsy, localized healing into systematic, horrifying exploitation.
Which brings us out of the 18th century and into the modern-day, hard sci-fi thriller aspect of the source material. We are moving to the Cinder Hills campsite near Sunset Crater in Arizona.
And the tone shifts from historical mystery to pure psychological terror.
We are introduced to three friends, Liza, Philip, and Felicity. They are camping, drinking, and trying to sneak into some off-limits cave systems in the crater. It's early evening. The sky is turning this soft, dusky pink, and Liza notices something strange happening to the air directly over the mountaintop.
It's shimmering.
Yeah, the air is bending and rippling unnaturally, almost like the intense heat distortion you see over black asphalt in the summer. But it's accompanied by tiny, swirling, luminous particles. Felicity tells her to ignore it, says it's just a mirage, but Liza can't look away.
She is drawn to a flickering light in the trees. She leaves her friends and wanders alone into the dark woods.
That shimmering air is the first clue. It's the visual signature of advanced metamaterial cloaking technology, bending light around a massive structure. But before she can comprehend what she's seeing, she is intercepted.
Right.
She runs into a man standing perfectly still in the forest. He is incredibly tall, gaunt, and has these piercing ice blue eyes, the trademark of a hybrid. He looks at her, raises his hand, and says, "Hands up," in this flat, weirdly mocking tone, and then he shoots her.
But it's not a bullet.
No. He fires a small, writhing, highly polished silver metallic worm into her shoulder. It immediately burrows straight through her skin and into her muscle tissue. Liza collapses and blacks out.
And when consciousness returns, the reality she knew has been entirely dismantled.
She wakes up, and she is no longer in the dirt of the Arizona forest. She is lying on a cold floor inside a sterile, metallic chamber. The walls are softly pulsing with blue light. It takes her a moment to realize the horrifying truth. She's aboard an alien spacecraft.
The transition from the mundane to the extraordinary is jarring, but her exploration of the ship reveals the true mechanical nightmare of their operation.
She sneaks out of the chamber and starts wandering down these long, curving, cold blue corridors. As she walks, she hears this low, hypnotic humming sound. It sounds like the vibration of massive water filtration systems. She follows the sound and enters a vast, cavernous room.
And the room is filled with rows upon rows of towering cylindrical glass tanks. They are filled with a thick, amniotic blue liquid.
And suspended inside these tanks are hundreds of bodies. Some are the gray, aquatic-looking aliens. Some are human.
It is literally a storage facility for biological hardware.
Liza creeps closer to one of the human tanks, peering through the condensation on the glass. The body floating inside is female. She wipes the glass, and she is looking directly at her own face. It is a perfect, identical copy of Liza, floating perfectly still, connected to tubes.
This is where the narrative introduces the concept of the puppet, and it completely shatters the listener's understanding of who they are actually following in the story.
It's a brilliant twist, because the Liza we have been following, the one who woke up terrified on the floor, the one sneaking through the corridors, feeling her heart pounding in her chest, is not the real Liza.
The real Liza is the one floating comatose in the tank. We have been following the clone.
The existential horror here is profound. The clone realizes she is a copy in the exact moment a high-ranking alien enters the room. Her name is Jetika.
Right.
She is a tall, gray-skinned alien who moves with this unnerving, liquid grace. She has enormous, fathomless black eyes. And Jetika isn't angry that the clone is awake. She's just mildly inconvenienced.
Jetika explains the brutal, logistical reality of the situation. The Anunnaki use these clones as biological rental cars.
She looks at the terrified clone and says, "You are a vessel, a puppet. Your soul is borrowed." The entire purpose of creating this perfect genetic replica of Liza was to provide a temporary host body for an alien entity.
These aliens take vacations on Earth. They download their consciousness into a human clone to walk around, experience the sensory input of Earth, maybe feel the sun or taste food without risking their own bodies or violating whatever strict rules of non-interference they pretend to follow.
The alien guest has finished their vacation. They have returned to the ship and vacated the clone. The clone, purely by accident, has booted up a rudimentary residual consciousness based on the neural pathways of the original Liza.
Think about this. It's like playing an incredibly immersive, hyper-realistic video game. You log in, you hijack a non-playable character, you run around the city, you live another life. When you get bored, you log out.
But imagine if, the second you logged out, the NPC's code mutated. The NPC wakes up, it looks at its hands, it feels genuine fear. It accesses the background lore files and thinks they are its own memories.
And then the game developer walks in, looks at the terrified NPC and says, "Oh, sorry, you aren't supposed to be self-aware. Your purpose is fulfilled."
And the developer doesn't just hit delete. The deletion process is physical and agonizing. Jetika shows no empathy whatsoever.
Not at all.
She steps up to the sobbing clone, plunges her long, spindly fingers into the clone's shoulder, and physically rips that writhing silver worm out of her flesh. Jutika says, "I'm only sorry you've grown a consciousness."
And the moment the worm is removed, the clone's structural integrity collapses.
Wait, she just dissolves her? Alive?
Exactly. She literally dissolves alive. Her skeletal structure softens, her muscles liquefy, and she just melts into a puddle of biological matter on the floor of the ship.
That is so messed up.
The silver worm is the key to this entire process. It is a piece of advanced biohardware. It acts as an external hard drive for consciousness, capable of capturing the neural map of a mind and translating it into a format that can be hot-swapped between biological mainframes.
Jutika takes that same silver worm, which now contains all the memories and sensory data the alien collected while wearing the clone, and she drops it into the blue fluid of the tank containing the real Liza.
The worm swims through the liquid, it drills into the real Liza's stomach, and interfaces with her central nervous system.
It forcefully overwrites her brain, syncing her memories so she believes she was the one walking through the woods the entire time.
The violation of autonomy is absolute. It's a terrifying portrait of cosmic voyeurism. The Anunnaki are using human lives as interactive sensory exhibits, entirely disregarding the psychological trauma inflicted on the original humans, and callously destroying the spontaneous life that erupts in their clones.
And the trauma bleeds directly back into reality, because the real Liza, now infected with these synthetic memories, is deposited back into the woods. She walks back into the campsite the next morning. Philip and Felicity are frantic. They rush over to hug her, but the woman who walks into camp is fundamentally broken.
The integration of the alien's memories and the trauma of the physical override has severely damaged her ability to function as a human being.
She is stiff. She is completely hollowed out. The text describes her internal monologue, and it is chilling. She's having to manually operate her own body.
Every single human interaction, every smile, every inflection of voice is a complex puzzle she has to consciously solve.
When Philip touches her arm, she violently flinches because the basic human exchange of thermal energy feels completely alien and overwhelming to her nervous system.
Philip is highly observant, and he begins to notice the subtle, terrifying flaws in her biological performance. We are entering the territory of the uncanny valley, where a replica is almost perfect, but the minute discrepancies trigger a deep, primal revulsion in the observer.
Her eyelids are blinking just a fraction of a second out of sync. When the light hits her eyes, her pupils don't constrict normally. They occasionally snap into thin reptilian slits.
He is observing the failure of the biological disguise in real time.
Philip notices that the skin on her arm occasionally ripples, almost like a digital glitch in a video feed trying to render a complex texture. The tension around the campfire is suffocating as Philip slowly realizes that the creature wearing his friend's face is a stranger.
He finally snaps. He backs away from the fire and demands, "What are you?"
And Liza doesn't panic. She just blinks far too slowly. The vertical slits return to her eyes, and she gives him this incredibly cold, dead smile. She says, "I am what you fear. You can't go back." Philip and Felicity turn and run blindly into the dark woods.
But they aren't just running from Liza. The alien Jutika descends from the shimmering sky, floating down through the trees to hunt them.
Jutika corners them. She tells them that humanity was never meant to perceive the mechanics of their operation. Liza's system failed. She didn't stay within the parameters of the simulation.
Jutika offers them a horrific choice. Submit to having their memories wiped to maintain the illusion, or remain awake and witness the terrifying reality of their subjugation.
Okay, I have to step in here and challenge the entire premise of their operation. If these beings, these guardians, are capable of engineering symbiotic angels that cure death, if they can build massive invisible spacecraft and digitize human consciousness onto a silver worm, why are they sneaking around campsites in Arizona?
It's a valid question.
If they want to study us, or even rule us, why not just park the ship over the United Nations and open a channel of communication? Why play these twisted, convoluted games with clones and memory wipes?
It is the most logical question to ask, and the answer the text provides strikes at the core of human limitation. Open, direct communication is impossible. It's not a matter of them not wanting to talk to us. It's a matter of biological and physical incompatibility.
Incompatibility.
Yes. Their language, their technology, and their fundamental perception of reality operate on a frequency and a dimensional scale that the human brain is simply not wired to process.
We literally lack the antenna to pick up their broadcast.
Precisely. If they were to reveal themselves openly, the sheer density of the information and the sensory input would likely cause mass psychological collapse. To understand how alien their reality truly is, we have to look at the story of Elsa.
Right.
This is where the text pulls back the curtain on the actual physics of the gods.
Elsa's narrative is where we dive into the hard sci-fi elements. The year is 2016. Elsa is a covert government operative. She is investigating anomalous technological artifacts, and she discovers a strange, glowing symbol, a number 3, suspended in the air.
It functions as a localized dimensional interface.
She reaches out and touches it. Instantly, her perception of reality fractures and shifts. She steps into this augmented reality layer of the world. Everything looks like a Tron grid, pulsing with geometric light.
Through this interface, she is contacted by an alien entity named Kerataris.
He bypasses the usual deception and brings Elsa directly aboard their massive, cloaked vessel, the Ayaku.
And aboard the Ayaku, Elsa is introduced to the central processing core of their entire civilization, the Kira Aktu.
It is described as a massive, floating, holographic geometric cube. It's constantly shifting, folding in on itself, emitting light and sound.
Karis explains to Elsa that human language is incredibly primitive. We use arbitrary sounds to represent abstract concepts or physical objects. The Jena language is fundamentally different.
How so?
It is entirely based on mathematical coordinates and spatial positioning. The Kira Aktu cube is the physical manifestation of their language. It is how they interface with the ship's navigation, how they communicate complex ideas, and how they perceive the universe.
When they speak to one another, they aren't using nouns and verbs. They are vocalizing the exact mathematical position of an object or a concept in three-dimensional space relative to themselves. The sound of their language is literally the audio translation of a coordinate.
To a human ear, it sounds chaotic. It can sound like a rapid electronic stutter, a series of deep clicks, or even a flock of birds chirping. They don't see objects, they see energy highways connecting coordinates.
And this concept of energy and frequency leads to what is arguably the most inventive and profound scientific concept in the entire source material, the concept of music DNA.
It's a really beautiful concept, honestly.
This blew my mind. I want to spend some time on this because the implications are staggering. We know human DNA as a sequence of chemical base pairs, adenine, cytosine, guanine, thymine, letters in a biological book. But the aliens perceive DNA as acoustic frequencies.
Imagine that every single genetic sequence, say A2, A6, A11, corresponds to a unique specific musical note. When combined, your entire genome creates a complex, continuous melody. The aliens literally listen to the acoustic signature of your cellular structure.
It is the ultimate application of somatics, the study of how sound frequencies can alter and shape physical matter. If you place sand on a metal plate and run a specific frequency through it, the sand organizes into perfect geometric patterns.
The text applies this principle to biology. A healthy cellular structure vibrates in a state of harmonic resonance. The text calls these green notes. But when a cell mutates, when disease or cancer takes hold, the structure changes, and therefore the frequency changes. It produces dissonance, red notes.
Disease is redefined not as a physical pathogen, but as a bad harmony. So how do they cure it? They don't use scalpels or chemotherapy. They use music beds.
A patient lies down on this bed, and the ship's sensors record the unique baseline melody of the patient's soul and healthy DNA. It identifies the dissonant red notes of the disease.
The bed then plays the patient's own music back into their body, but it acts as a resonant phase canceller. It smooths out the acoustic peaks, literally tuning the diseased cells back into their correct frequency, healing the body from the inside out by forcing the matter to conform to the correct sound wave.
It is an incredibly elegant, non-invasive approach to biology. But, and this is crucial, the text immediately subverts the idea that these beings are omnipotent. They possess this miraculous acoustic technology, but they are also deeply flawed scientists who make catastrophic errors.
They are not infallible guides. They are just engineers with better tools, and sometimes they completely lose control of their own experiments. Elsa has a conversation with the ship's artificial intelligence, an entity named Era. Elsa asks about Earth's long history of UFO sightings. She specifically brings up the Foo Fighters.
The glowing orbs that Allied and Axis pilots reported pacing their aircraft during World War II, ufologists have debated them for decades.
Era dismisses the mythology entirely. The AI reveals that those orbs were not scout ships or advanced surveillance drones. They were botched Guardian experiments.
The aliens were trying to test new atmospheric cloaking and energy manipulation tech, and the technology was wildly unstable.
It was leaking plasma and radiation. They were essentially flying defective prototypes through active human war zones.
And the origin of that cloaking technology is even more humiliating for these supposed cosmic masters.
This is the wildest detail. The AI explains that their advanced cloaking shields, the technology that makes the Ayaku invisible to human radar and sight, is based on carbon nanotube structures. But they didn't invent it from scratch.
They reverse engineered it from a creature on Earth.
They studied a translucent, gelatinous, barrel-shaped sea creature called the Selpa major. These hyper-advanced aliens came to our planet and basically stole biological camouflage tech from our jellyfish.
It completely demystifies them. It paints them as opportunistic scavengers who struggle to control the forces they manipulate. They attempt to use wormholes to bend space and travel through time, but the tech is highly unpredictable.
They accidentally cause temporal anomalies and historical glitches because they simply do not fully understand the physics they are playing with.
Even their profound coordinate-based language has a history of failure on Earth. Kataris tells Elsa that the ancient human practice of throat singing, where a vocalist produces multiple distinct pitches simultaneously, didn't originate naturally.
It was early humanity's desperate attempt to mimic the complex, multi-layered frequency of the alien language. The Anunnaki tried to teach us how to speak the coordinates of the universe, but our vocal cords and our brains couldn't handle the bandwidth. We were left with the musical echo of a language we forgot how to use.
And that concept of lost potential extends to the human mind itself. During one of the interviews aboard the ship, an alien explains that the human mind is not a contained biological computer. It is an infinite dimensional space composed of those same energy highways that the aliens use to navigate the stars.
Every single memory you have, every action you take, builds a new road in your mind. The alien says that routine tasks like driving to work or brushing your teeth are boxed up and coded to save energy. But over a lifetime, a human creates trillions of intersecting highways.
The tragedy is that we don't know how to drive on them. The alien points out that when humans lose a physical object, like our keys, we retrace our physical steps. But the real journey happens internally.
He claims that if you can find the key memory, the precise energetic intersection where the thought was formed, you can instantly recall any detail from your entire life with absolute crystalline clarity.
So consider what this actually means. The text is redefining everything humanity categorizes as magic, miracles, or divine intervention as simple frequency manipulation and advanced mental navigation.
I want to challenge you, the listener, to think about this right now. Think about how you try to remember a lost detail. You close your eyes, you squint, you physically tense your brain, trying to feel your way back through the dark to a specific moment.
The aliens are telling us that the infrastructure is there. We have trillions of mental highways. We just lost the map.
Is the human mind actually capable of accessing this quantum recall? Or is the text suggesting that we are biologically locked out of our own potential, permanently kneecapped by that failed hybrid experiment thousands of years ago?
The implication is that we possess the necessary hardware, the complex neural network, but we lack the software key. We are functioning on the same fundamental energetic principles as the Jennas, but we are blind to the mechanics. We are driving a Formula One car, but we think it's a bicycle.
But just as Elsa is standing on the observation deck of this colossal, invisible ship, marveling at the music DNA and the energy highways of the universe, the author pulls the rug out from under the reader so violently that it causes whiplash.
The text introduces a meta-narrative layer that questions whether the Ayaku, the Jennas, the music DNA, and everything we just discussed is actually real at all.
We drop out of the stratosphere and land in the incredibly grounded, tragic reality of a woman named Linda.
Linda is a waitress living in a small, dusty town, and she is dying. She has terminal leukemia. Her body is failing her. Concurrently, she is undergoing intense psychiatric treatment. Her psychiatrist, Mr. Tennessee, has officially diagnosed Linda with severe dissociative identity disorder, or DID.
Mrs. Tennessee represents the voice of clinical medical orthodoxy. She believes that Linda's overwhelming, paralyzing fear of her impending death has caused her mind to fracture. To cope with the reality of her failing body, Linda's subconscious has constructed an incredibly elaborate, impenetrable delusion.
Because Linda believes with every fiber of her being that she has been communicating telepathically with an alien named Thomas for 21 years. She believes that Jaiska, Magda, Kataris, the Ayaku, the silicon biology, all of it, is completely real. She believes she is a central figure in an ongoing interstellar conflict.
The psychological parallel is brilliant. The concept of music DNA, a technology that can non-invasively tune a diseased cell back to health, is the exact specific fantasy a woman dying of blood cancer would invent.
The complex political betrayals and lack of control within the alien hierarchy perfectly mirror Linda's feelings of helplessness regarding her own deteriorating physical state.
The diagnosis makes perfect, heartbreaking sense. But then, the clinical explanation begins to collapse under the weight of impossible physical evidence. The crisis escalates exponentially. Linda wakes up one morning, and there is a heavy black glass bracelet attached to her wrist.
It is seamless. She cannot physically remove it.
And then, the delusion bleeds into the physical world. A massive, undeniable UFO appears in the sky directly over her small town. And it's not peacefully hovering, it is actively destroying infrastructure. It's blowing up water towers and setting cars on fire.
The consensus reality of the town is shattered. Linda and her pragmatic friend Ruby are forced to flee the destruction and hide in an abandoned house.
Inside the house, Linda is spiraling into a panic attack. She confesses to Ruby that she might be responsible for the attack. She reveals that she possesses something she calls a Glory Day device, hidden beneath a floorboard.
The alien Jayska promised her that this device could cure her leukemia via a signal from space. But activating it carries a catastrophic risk. It might trigger the Second Coming, a full-scale alien invasion of Earth.
Linda is trapped in a paradox of guilt. She believes her internal desire to be healed has drawn the destruction of the void down upon her town. To prove that she is worthy of this intervention, she explains to Ruby the bizarre, subconscious trials she had to pass to be recognized as a general by the alien high command.
And these tests are where the surrealism peaks. The tests don't happen in a physical room, they happen deep within her mind. She is judged by terrifying, shape-shifting officers. In her mind, one officer takes the form of Sonic the Hedgehog, another manifests looking exactly like Jason Momoa playing Aquaman.
Hold on, Aquaman. And Sonic the Hedgehog. That is insane.
It sounds absurd, but it highlights how the subconscious uses familiar pop culture iconography to mask incomprehensible cosmic forces. The tests themselves are profound exercises in systems thinking.
The Aquaman test is a perfect example. Linda is mentally projected back in time to 4000 BC. She is placed in a primitive temple. She finds a starving mother holding 2 dying babies and a starving goat. The mother only has enough resources to keep one baby alive.
Linda's first instinct is utilitarian. She feeds the remaining hay to the goat, which produces milk, saving both babies. She thinks she solved the puzzle, but the Aquaman entity tells her she failed. The solution is incomplete.
Because she only solved the localized problem. She failed to see the macroecological system.
Exactly. She resets the scenario. She leaves the temple and searches the surrounding landscape. She discovers that the early humans in the area are using primitive catapults to hunt and kill massive Brachiosaurus dinosaurs for meat.
Linda suddenly realizes the systemic failure. By exterminating the megafauna, the humans have robbed the topsoil of the massive amounts of dinosaur manure required to fertilize the earth. The plants died, the ghosts starved, the humans starved.
Linda's final solution isn't to kill a dinosaur to feed the family. It's to gather the Brachiosaurus manure and fertilize the temple's dead garden, restoring the entire ecological balance of the region.
She passes the test by proving she understands the delicate, interconnected web of life. But the ultimate question hovering over this entire sequence is any of this actually happening?
Right. Are we witnessing the heroic trials of an interstellar general, or are we just watching the agonizing neurological breakdown of a woman dying in an abandoned house?
This is where the text demands that we analyze the duality of perception. We have to look at the filter theory of consciousness. Think of Aldous Huxley's concept of the brain as a reducing valve.
The theory suggests that the human brain does not generate consciousness. Rather, the universe is a roaring ocean of pure consciousness and information, what the text calls the void, and our brains act as a filter,
blocking out 99% of that cosmic noise so we can focus on simple survival tasks, like finding food and avoiding predators.
Okay, if we apply that theory to Linda, her terminal leukemia is physically degrading her brain. The biological filter is failing. Miss Tennessee thinks the disease is causing hallucinations. But what if the disease is actually eroding the reducing valve, allowing Linda's mind to finally tune into the frequencies that have always been there? What if deed isn't a fracturing of the mind, but an opening of the aperture?
Kataris explicitly tells Linda, just because you're blind to see what we see doesn't mean we aren't here. If the filter theory holds true, Linda isn't inventing the Anunnaki to cope with her death. Her dying brain is simply dropping the veil, allowing her to perceive the architects of reality that healthy humans are biologically locked out from seeing.
I am completely fascinated by the philosophical implications here. I want to push this to its absolute limit. If Linda's mind is acting as a radio receiver for the void, if her thoughts are actively coalescing with this cosmic energy, does the clinical distinction between a hallucination and reality even matter anymore?
Look at the evidence. She has a physical, irremovable black glass bracelet on her arm. There is a literal UFO outside the window blowing up cars. If her internal trauma is potent enough to physically manifest an alien invasion in the sky above her town, hasn't her internal reality successfully overwritten the external consensus reality of the world?
It is the ultimate collapse of the binary. Reality is essentially consensus. If you dream with enough energetic force that the dream begins to manipulate the physical physics of the waking world, the dream is no longer a delusion, it is a new reality.
She has provided the bridge for the void to enter our dimension. The Anunnaki, the symbiotes, the coordinate language, all of it becomes physically real, precisely because Linda's consciousness demanded it to survive the terror of her own mind.
That is staggering. The implication is that mankind's only true survival mechanism isn't physical adaptation, but the sheer reality-warping power of consciousness itself.
Wow. We have covered an immense, challenging landscape today. We started by examining the tragic biological failures of the genus silicon-based entities hiding in our oceans, incapable of surviving the immune system of our planet.
We trace their desperate shift from creating aggressive titans to relying on the terrifying, miraculous biotechnology of symbiotic angels to rewrite human neural pathways in ancient caves.
We confronted the ethical nightmare of the puppets, where human clones are dissolved alive to facilitate the cosmic voyeurism of beings who view our bodies as disposable hardware. We explored a massive cloaked vessel where language is spoken in 3D coordinates, where disease is treated as a bad musical harmony, and where the gods themselves steal technology from jellyfish.
And finally, we grounded all of that cosmic architecture in the fractured, incredibly powerful mind of a dying waitress, exploring the possibility that the universe itself is just a frequency waiting for the right mind to tune into it.
It's a phenomenal synthesis of mythology, hard science fiction, and deep psychological trauma. To you, the listener, as you go about the rest of your day, I want you to re-examine your own internal landscape. How often do you wake up from an incredibly vivid, hyper-real dream and immediately dismiss it as just a random, meaningless misfiring of a tired brain?
What if you shouldn't dismiss it?
What if those dreams are exactly what this text suggests they are, wormholes to other realities? What if your mind is actively picking up signals on a quantum energy highway and you just haven't remembered how to drive on it yet?
And if we are considering the mechanics of the mind, I want to leave you with one final, deeply unsettling thought to chew on. A concept we touched upon, but its ultimate implication is terrifying. Think back to the technology of the silverworm, the device that Jaitika used to rip the memories out of the dissolving clone and inject them into the real Liza.
The external hard drive for the soul.
Exactly. The text posits that human consciousness, our memories, the very essence of what makes you, is not an ethereal spiritual mist. It is a physical, measurable, transferable entity. It is a USB drive made of pure energy. If that is scientifically true, what actually happens to the biological host body when that energy is removed?
If you are facing a terminal illness like Linda, and you are offered the alien technology to download your complete consciousness, every memory, every quirk, your entire music DNA, into a perfectly healthy, lab-grown clone of yourself, would you do it?
And more importantly, well, when the eyes of that healthy clone open in the tank, would the entity looking out through those eyes really be you? Or would you be dead while a flawless biological machine walks the earth, playing the acoustic echo of your soul without the original spark of life?
Man, that is the ultimate diagnostic question, isn't it? Are we the physical hardware, or are we just the software running on it? It brings us right back to the beginning, standing in the murky waters. You can take an X-ray of the brain, you can map every single synapse, but it will never show you where the soul actually lives, or where it goes when it's unplugged. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the Annunaki Bible. Keep questioning your reality, keep exploring the vast highways of your own mind, and we'll see you next time.